Welcome back to my channel Flutter with Jana. Today we will discuss about stateful widgets lifecycle method in Flutter with a detail in a real life example. And in the end, we will run through the code and understand whenever we change the screen orientation, which method gets called and what happens. Similarly, we'll check for the child methods, how it responds to the parent changes. So let's deep dive into the code and understand. So if you see this example, this tree represents a widget tree and the red branches are representing widget while this flower represents a state. So when we consider stateful widget, two classes are primarily used. One is a widget itself and second is a state. So whenever we call stateful widget, first is constructor gets called. That is where the widget was created. So the stateful widget is nothing without a state. So state has to be created. So the first lifecycle method gets called here is a create state. This method create a state and it returns an object. Now at this point of a time, you have a widget and state together, but they are not yet attached to the widget tree. So the next method that gets called init state. Before the init state completes, widget and state both are attached to the widget tree. So understand what init state does. We may have some API calls, or we may want to send the data to the analytics, like this, which page is loaded. So we want to perform those operations only one time, not a multiple times. So that's where init state comes in a place. Let's move on to the another method, did change dependencies. As the name suggests, it changes based on the dependencies. But what kind of dependencies? In this example, let's consider this tree or the flowers. There depends on sunlight. When there is a scorching heat, because of that heat, the color of a flower may change or it may fade little bit or it may turn darker. If we suppose in case of Flutter, it depends on the inherited widget, like theme of, media query of. Whenever this changes, then only this method gets called. So this did change dependencies method get called immediately after init state, and second state is whenever there is external dependency that changes. Let's move on to another method called build. This method gets called multiple times. Whenever did change dependencies happen, immediately build get called. After did update widget, build get immediately called. And if you want to manually update a state, you call state at that time also build gets called. So what function does build perform? Basically, build method updates a UI in response to the state change. So if we consider state is a flower here, but the color of a flower, these are its properties. So that you can modify using set state. So as you are aware, stateful widgets are immutable. That means you cannot modify the widget itself. So a new widget is created every time we call a build method. And the state, it remains same. Only its values can change. Let's move to another method called did update widget. Many people confuses did update with did change dependencies. So when does did update widget gets called? Whenever there is change in a parent data, or parent sends an updated value through constructor to the child. So in that case, there has to be a parent linked, but in did change dependencies, there is no connection to the parent. Let's discuss about another method called deactivate. This method gets called whenever a widget is temporarily removed from the widget tree. At this point of a time, state is still intact. There might be the chances when the widget may get inserted into the widget tree. So dispose method is a final method which gets called when a widget is permanently removed from the widget tree and state is also destroyed. Let's move on to another example. Suppose you want to install smart LED bulb into your home. As you are aware, whenever we create a stateful widget, its constructor gets called and a widget is created. So same thing happens here. You order a bulb, the bulb will first be created and then it will be delivered to you by Amazon or a Flipkart or any other party services. So the second method gets called init state. You receive the courier, you unbox it and you see the bulb for the first time. So third method is did change dependencies. As this bulb is a smart LED, it depends on a Wi-Fi. So once you connect your Wi-Fi to the bulb, it gets lit up. So suppose there is no electricity and your router is not working. So in that case, Wi-Fi will not be connected and your bulb will not be on. It's basically an off state. So this is the external dependency that we are talking about. Turned up. As you know, there are multiple features with the bulb. It can change its color shades from yellow, green, red to another. So as you are aware, setState is a method which you manually trigger to update the build. So whenever you press the button to change the color from red to green or green to yellow, the build method gets called, and every time you see the bulb remains same but its color is changing. So state is maintained, only state variables that is holding that gets changed. Now let's move to another method, did update widget. As we are aware, this method gets called whenever the parent updates or parent sends a new value through constructor to its child. So in that case, we will be replacing the bulb with a new model which has a new features. The next method is deactivate. So you temporarily remove the bulb as you are painting your home. You don't want the bulb to be get dirty. So you unplugged it and you keep it somewhere. So you may reinsert that bulb whenever needed. So the last method gets called dispose. You throw the bulb away as its life is over. It is not useful. So it's cleanup complete. So you are not going to use that bulb anywhere. We will not be doing any fancy UI and we will not be following some code standards. The basic purpose of this tutorial is to understand which method gets called and when. So let's see, this is a my widget, it's a stateful widget, and the first method that gets called is a create state. We are printing a create state method, and then its state is created and the object is returned here. The second method gets called is init state, did change dependencies, and if you see screen width, media query dot of context size width, this is a inherited widget. So whenever you change the orientation at this point of a time, this screen width changes. So that's the reason this did change dependencies gets called. So the next method we see build method. We have is a parent build here. After that deactivate and did update widget. This method gets called whenever there is change in a parent, and then dispose. So we'll run through it and we'll see which method gets called. I'll click on a next page button here. If you see create state, init state, did change dependency is called with a screen width of 393, and then build method gets called. I'll click on back button. So deactivate and dispose. Create state, init state, did change dependencies, build, deactivate and dispose. I'll restart it again. If you see create state, init state, did change dependencies and build method. I'll change the orientation now. Before that, let me clear all. I'll move it, deactivate and dispose. I'll again go to the next page. Now I'll change the orientation now. If you see parent did change dependency is called with a screen width. Now the width is increased because it's in the landscape mode, and once we call did change dependencies, build gets called. I'll move this again. So again see now, whenever we came to the different screen width, did change dependencies is called, and immediately after that build gets called. What impact a parent has on a child when it updates its state? So we do have a same widget here, my widget, which has a state, my widget state. We are more concerned about a build method here. So this build method contains a container which has a column which uses a button internally, that is update child widget. On press of it, it is calling increment counter. This increment counter, it does update a state and increment a value of a counter. So when it updates a value, it is updating a state. So once that is done, this state is passed to the counter display. It is a child. So counter display is another stateful widget. For the understanding purpose, we have added a debug print for the every overridden method. So we'll try to run this code and understand what happens actually. So I click on the next page. If you can understand, parent create state called, parent init, then did change dependencies, build called, and when the code reaches to the counter display, it's create state called, init, did change dependencies, and build gets called. Now I'll try to change the orientation here. So if you see, the orientation is changed and only parents did change dependencies gets called, and parent build immediately, and child once build is called. In that case, did change dependency didn't called for the child. The reason, the child will get updated only when parents rebuild through constructor values, but in this case the child doesn't depend on any external dependencies. So that's the reason did change dependencies method didn't get called. So will you clear this trash? I'll again come back to the orientation here. Now what I'll do, I'll update a child. So if you see from the parent, I press this update child button, the counter is incremented here. So the child one did update widget is gets called because now parent is passing that value through the constructor. That's the reason did update get called, and immediately after that build method gets called. I'll click once again. So if you see, it holds a value reference to the previous value. I'll click once more time. Parent is rebuilding, then child did update is called, and then child is built. I'll call one more time. Now what I'll do, I'll click hot reload. So see what happens now. I'll click update widget. For a reference, did you see the counter is changed from 4 to 5? So in hot reload, the state is preserved. State is not lost. So we'll move back. So we'll do one more thing here now. I'll come back to the code. I'll erase everything, and now I'll open this dummy widget. I'll rerun the app. I'll click on the next page button. Let's see what happens now. So static text is another child. So as usual, create state, init state, did change dependencies, build, create state, init state, and now the child whose dummy widget build gets called. So dummy widget is nothing but it has only static text. It does nothing more than that. So what will happen now? There's nothing changed in dummy widget, but still it gets called. Now I'll show you. I'll click on update child. So only we are passing a value to the counter display, but we haven't passed anything to dummy widget, but still its build method gets called. The reason being, whenever the parent updates, the child has to update. So if you see, for the counter display, parent is build, did update get called for the counter display, and the child's build one is called, and dummy widget, if you see, its build also get called. So how can I prevent that? Because it's only dummy text. It doesn't add any value. So I'll add a const here. I'll clear I'll rerun the app once again now. So as usual, because the app is run for the first time, create state, init state, on all those. Now I'll clear the trash. Now I'll click on update child. Now you see, dummy widget didn't call because we have used const here. So the const prevents unnecessary rebuilds because it's a constant. I'll click on it once again. You see, the child to build method didn't get called. So that is for today, guys. I hope you understand it, and if you like it, please do like, subscribe, and do comment. Thank you.